I've already told you about my favorite online multiplayer games a while back, and today I got something similar, except we're talking about single-player games. However, this time I won't just be talking about them, I'll be recommending, because today I'm gonna talk about 5 great single-player games that you've probably heard of, but chances are you've never played them because they're usually overshadowed by something more popular from the same developers, or they're just not like a super mainstream and deserve far more attention. By the way, I'm gonna avoid any kind of spoilers, so if you decide to try some of these games yourself, you won't get your experience ruined. Anyway, let's get into it. So the first one we got Titanfall 2. Now I'm pretty sure if you're a gamer you've heard of Titanfall at least once. Its developers Respawn Entertainment are pretty popular among their other games, mainly because of Apex Legends, which is a game based on Titanfall universe and lore. Most of the Apex player base know this game, but never actually played Titanfall, which is a big mistake and you should be ashamed of yourself. Anyway, when we're talking about Titanfall games in general, it's an FPS game set in a huge sci-fi universe full of futuristic tech, weapons, planets to explore and other fun stuff. The first Titanfall was released in 2014 as the first game Respawn has made as a newly founded studio, and the reason I'm talking specifically about Titanfall 2 in this video is because it was purely an online game with no single player campaign. It was one super entertaining and creative concept that stood out among the rest of the games at the time. Titans, gigantic robots that you as a pilot control with your own body movement. This is of course the main trademark of the game, that's why it's called Titanfall. Besides that, the game has a super fun and unique gameplay in terms of both movement and gunplay, great level design, weapons, characters, everything about it is just so fucking cool, and there's a good reason for that. The guys behind the foundation of Respawn were already veterans in the gaming industry. They are the ones behind a bunch of other awesome and beloved games, such as the old Call of Duty games. Anyway, a few years later, Titanfall 2 comes out, and aside from the improved online mode, it has a single-player campaign. The main protagonist, Jack Cooper, is a soldier fighting for militia forces to free his homeworld when his entire unit gets killed on the mission. Before he dies, his commanding officer, a pilot, transfers his Titan link to Cooper, who has never used a Titan before by the way, but there's kinda no one else left alive to do it. He's supposed to complete a special operation, find and stop the super weapon their enemy, the IMC, is building. Sounds simple, but it's one of the absolute best story games I've ever played. The gameplay, atmosphere, level design, and especially the relationship between Jack Cooper and his Titan BT is something that made me replay the game multiple times, and I still love it today. I think the reason Titanfall's been kind of flying under the radar is that it's being overshadowed by much more popular mainstream games at the time, and with EA being EA, Titanfall lost his development support a few years later when Apex Legends was created, which is based on its lore as I said before, but Titanfall is still pretty much popular only among the hardcore fans such as myself. I love this game, I love its entire universe, everything about it, and I want the story to continue. So my only question is, where the fuck is Titanfall 3? Coming up next on the list is a game, or I should say a game series now, called Ghost Runner. Now unlike Respawn, its devs one more level are pretty much new to the scene. Ghost Runner is the first game that made these guys somewhat popular. They can still be called an indie studio with very limited resources. Anyway, what is Ghost Runner? It's an action platform first-person game set in the post-apocalyptic world with a dirty cyberpunk aesthetics. What makes this game absolutely unique is one of the most fun gameplay mechanics I've ever seen. Your enemies use guns, you don't. Your main weapon is this badass sword. Your other weapons are movement and special abilities you can upgrade along the way. The way TTK basically works is one shot, one kill. You have no health bar. You are a health bar. You get shot once, you're dead. Back to the last checkpoint. The thing is, your enemies work the same way. You hit that motherfucker once, he's gone. The only exceptions are boss fights of course, and let me tell you, some of them are pretty creative and unique. Like, when was the last time you fought a fucking elevator? Like, his name's literally fucking Tom. Oh, and by the way, I almost forgot to mention, the music in this game is absolute banger. Definitely one of the best video game soundtracks I've ever heard. When it comes to the story, as I mentioned before, it is set in a post-apocalyptic world where the Earth gets destroyed by a cataclysmic event, and it's not possible to live on the surface anymore. The only safe place is a Dharma City. It's a gigantic tower with a city inside where the society is trying to survive. Main character of this game is the Ghost Runner. Who would have thought? He's some kind of a cyborg ninja. Basically, Ghost Runners were guardians of the city until this Dr. Octopus looking bitch took over and killed all of them, so she can create her little Soviet Union over there. Your Ghost Runner is the only one alive, and your main objective is to take her down. That's what the first game's about. The second game is a sequel, where the people of Dharma City are trying to recover and put their lives back together, while there is a new unknown threat from the outside, and I don't know anything else because I haven't finished the game yet. I hate myself. Overall, I think Ghost Runner as a game has a huge potential, as do its developers, and if they keep making games like these two, I think they have what it takes to become one of the mainstream studios in the gaming industry, and then get bought out by EA and get fucked straight in the butthole. The next game I'm gonna talk about is Alan Wake, and this one is again a game from a very popular developer, but it's overshadowed by more mainstream titles. When I say Remedy Entertainment, most people will probably remember the legendary Max Payne series. Real OGs might remember their first game ever made, the MS-DOS racing game called Death Rally. But there are other great games made by Remedy, and Alan Wake for me is the one that stands out the most. Alan Wake is a heavily story and atmosphere focused game. I wouldn't call it a horror, more like psychological thriller. But again, when it comes to gameplay, it has some super cool and unique mechanics to offer. To properly understand the gameplay mechanics, let's take a look at the story first. The game is set in a small fictional town called Bright Falls, located in the middle of a beautiful landscape full of mountains and dark forests. You know what else is dark? My humor, of course. Oh, and besides that, the weird darkness entity trying to take over the world, starting in Bright Falls. There's so much more to the story, but you need to discover it yourself. That's basically what the game is about. Your protagonist, Alan Wake, is a famous rider from New York who decides he wants to take a break from his ordinary life and try some of that redneck countryside lifestyle. As a certified redneck myself, I can recommend it, by the way. It's fun. I mean, it's fun unless you pick Bright Falls as your destination and take your wife with you so she can get kidnapped and you can get blackmailed over it, which is exactly what happens to Alan at the start of the game. So obviously, your goal is to find out what happened to her and at the same time fight your way through dark presence slowly taking over, as well as Alan's mental health becoming worse and worse. In the right stages of the game, you will sometimes have a problem to determine what's even real. It's kinda like comments on my videos. The fight with darkness is a main gameplay concept. Your weapon is light. That's the only way to damage possessed enemies. Flashlight, flares, reflectors, everything that emits some kind of light can be used against them. All enemies have this sort of shield of darkness around them that needs to be broken by the light first, and then you can shoot them. For that, the game offers a wide arsenal of classic weapons, from pistols to shotguns, even SMGs and ARs in the American Nightmare DLC. The original Alan Wake was released in 2010 for Xbox, then sometime later for PC as well, and in 2021 it got a complete graphic remaster. We've waited a long time for a sequel, but in 2023, Alan Wake 2 finally came out, continuing the story of the original game. In this game, you play as an FBI agent coming to Bright Falls to investigate Alan Wake's disappearance, while he's trapped in a world of darkness trying to get out. It brings a lot of new mechanics, such as playing from two characters' points of view, or a new lore, characters, and much more of a horror atmosphere. And yes, I'll make a self-report right here. I haven't played it yet. I have the game, but I don't have a disk space. Do you know how fucking big this thing is? Anyway, the first Alan Wake game is one of its kind. For me, an absolute peak of a single-player story-focused gaming. Its story, unique gameplay, and incredible atmosphere and environment is something I always come back to. Like seriously, back in the day, I finished this game like 5 times. It's just that special, and yet far less popular than it deserves to be. We have another underrated classic on this list, a game everyone has heard about at least once, but never actually played it, Mirror's Edge. This game is very well known across the gaming scene for two reasons: its developer studio DICE, and the gameplay mechanics that might be standard in modern games, but back in 2009 when Mirror's Edge came out, it was something completely new. We obviously know DICE because of the Battlefield series and the Star Wars Battlefront games, but it was Mirror's Edge that set the new standards with its incredibly fun, unique and engaging gameplay. There's one thing everyone would tell you even if they never played the game before. It is a parkour game, and that's exactly what made Mirror's Edge stand out at the time: the movement mechanics. Things like parkour, slide, or wall run were not really common back in the day. There are some first-person action games that used some of these mechanics before, but Mirror's Edge not only took all this to another level, but it was the first game building its entire gameplay around it. It's safe to say that parkour and movement is your primary weapon. It gets you everywhere around the map, it helps you escape from danger, it's required to progress in the story. Speaking of the story and its setting, basically take Orwell's 1984 and put it into the big modern city. Boom, you have the Mirror's Edge lore. However, despite being a total dystopia, the city is just beautiful. It stands out mostly because of the absolute minimal color palette it's using, basically working only with white and light shades of blue, with some additional colors from time to time being bright as fuck, creating a very interesting contrast. For example, your objective is always red, so there's absolutely no chance you would miss it. Even if you turn off your monitor, you're still gonna see it. But it's not just the colors creating a totally unique atmosphere of this game, like there's something about the lighting as well. It looks so calm and cinematic. Like, keep in mind this is a 15-year-old game and it still looks amazing. The story of Mirror's Edge is really simple. It's nothing special, but it's still good. Your main protagonist is Fate, a young girl who loves jumping over the buildings and falling down from the buildings. She belongs among so-called runners, which is some sort of illegal clan delivering information and completing tasks outside of the law. At the start of the game, Fate's sister gets framed for a murder of a high-profile politician, and Fate basically decides to find out who's behind it and clear her sister's name. There's obviously more to the story, but again, no spoilers. Play it for yourself if you wanna know, or use the internet, I don't care, but you ain't getting shit from me. I'd rather die than ruin the game for you with spoilers. Oh, chill, that was a joke! Since you are fighting a corrupt government and their security sniffing all around, Mirror's Edge has a combat system, and it's pretty cool. You can even use firearms, although that one feels goofy as fuck, but considering it's not a shooter game, it's not even really a combat-focused game in general, I think it's fine. There is a second Mirror's Edge game from 2016 called Mirror's Edge Catalyst. It's supposed to be a sequel set after the events of the first one, of course with better graphics, improved gameplay and plenty new mechanics like upgrades. However, they try to go even further with the gameplay changes, so instead of a straight storyline, second Mirror's Edge is open world, and to be completely honest, it doesn't really work for me. Anyway, these two games are still definitely worth trying, especially if you like games full of action, fun gameplay and a great atmosphere and story, you won't regret it. So, go try it yourself, and I wish you a nice edging. The last game series I'm gonna talk about today is a pretty unique case, because its popularity is sort of region specific. It's like a metric system, really popular in Europe, but Americans don't know what it is. I'm talking about the trilogy of action-adventure games called Mafia, developed by 2K Czech, or known by its previous name, Illusion Softworks. You might have heard about these guys because of a different game, Kingdom Come Deliverance. KCD is definitely more popular around the world, and while being a very solid and established game, especially with the release of KCD 2 literally just a few weeks ago, I think Mafia deserves much more attention than it gets on the international scene. As the name suggests, all three games explore stories set in the criminal underworld, the never-ending war of crime families over local control, usually from the perspective of an outsider who gets forced into criminal life and needs to adapt or die. The characters and their storylines, and of course the unique environment and atmosphere, is what makes Mafia stand out the most. All three games takes place in fictional American cities during the first half of the last century, with that classic vibes of an old America. You know what I'm talking about, it's all over the movies and TV shows, but it's something that gives Mafia its identity. I think the best way to describe the gameplay is that it's literally the same as GTA. Now I just pissed both GTA and Mafia fanbases, so I can't wait to read some lovely comments about it, like the last time with self-proclaimed witch lore masters. Okay, I admit, this one was a total rage bait. It was the same game genre as GTA, with the classic gameplay features like firefights, close range fights, stealth, and the key elements of the gameplay is of course driving, while all being in the third person. But Mafia gameplay is just something special. It feels totally unique and iconic, like I don't know how to describe it properly, you need to play it for yourself. Speaking of that, let's go over all three games released so far. Of course without spoilers, please don't shoot me in the head again, I barely survived the last one. The first game is super old, almost ancient these days. Okay, this one was a self-burn cause it's just a bit older than me, so yes, I'm a fossil as well. It was released in 2002 and it was one of the first games they've ever created, and it was the start of the legendary Mafia game series. In 2020, the game got its official remake called Mafia Definitive Edition, with modern graphics, a lot better gameplay for today's standards, and some minor story and dialogue changes. The story is set in 1930s during the Great Depression, in a fictional city of Lost Heaven. We're following the story of Tom Angelo, a taxi driver who gets caught up in the middle of a war between two local crime families, when he's forced to help members of one of them, making himself a target for their enemies. In desperation and fear for his life, he accepts an offer to work for Don Salieri, who is the leader of a crime family he helped before. We then follow his story from the start as a rookie to a professional full-time gangster, all the way to his initial split up and escape. This is not a spoiler by the way, it's literally in the beginning of the game. The entire story is basically told by him in retrospect. Ever since its release, the first game was really successful all across Europe, so the sequel was already a must-have. The year was 2010, and the long-awaited sequel Mafia 2 has finally come out, with the improved controls and gameplay, tons of new features and of course a completely new graphics, which is not bad even 14 years later for today's standards. The story is set in 1940s during and after the World War II, and we play as Vito Scaletta, a Sicilian immigrant who joined the US Army to avoid his prison sentence. Later during the war, he gets injured and released to come back to his hometown of Empire Bay. He gets reunited with his family and his childhood friend Joe, who is now working for the local mob, the Clement crime family. When Vito sees his own family dealing with financial struggles, he decides to help them by accepting Joe's offer to use fake release order, leave the army and work with him. Of course, the lore of Mafia 2 is connected to the previous one, and I'll stop right here cause obviously spoilers. With the release of Mafia 2, the game just solidified its place among the most popular games in the region, obviously not enough worldwide to not end up in this video, but it was still an insane achievement, especially for a dev team from a country most of the world doesn't even know exists. Mafia 1 was popular, Mafia 2 became a certified hood classic. If you were not around when the first game got released, you probably started on the second one when it was new, just like I did. Honestly, I might like Mafia 2 even more than the first one, probably because of its setting and theme. One fun fact about Mafia 2. Before it was beaten by GTA 5, the game held the record for the most profanity used in a video game ever, with the word fuck or kurva in the original Czech voice acting used more than 200 times, which is absolutely not surprising. I mean, it's a Czech game, it absolutely fits the stereotype. Look at my own fucking language, holy shit. Anyway, I played both 1 and 2, finished them multiple times, and I absolutely love these games. For a long time, there were only 2 Mafia games, until 2016 when Mafia 3 was released, and unlike previous 2 games, it was developed by a different studio, Hangar 13. Who would later work on remakes of all games, with 2K Czech being just a publisher. This may be a reason why Mafia 3 doesn't really live up to the standards set by previous 2 games. Now I'll be honest, I haven't played it yet, so I can't judge for myself, but from what I've heard, most people had the problems with gameplay full of bugs, some missions being absolute boring snooze fest, and the story and characters just not being that good compared to Mafia 1 and 2. The lore and story of this game is not directly connected to the previous ones, it's more like a standalone story, just set in the same universe 20 years later, in the 60s. The main character is Lincoln Clay, a Vietnam War veteran who returns home to help his family settle down their problems with the local mafia, but the shit goes sideways and his family gets killed. After that, Lincoln decides to build his own criminal empire to avenge his family and take down the one that killed them. Again, I haven't played it myself, but despite all the critics it gets, the story sounds interesting and I will definitely try it at some point. But you know what? There's a 4th Mafia game already. Or more like, there is about to be. Mafia: The Old Country, announced just a few months back. The 4th Mafia game returns back on track with the original Mafia lore, being a prequel to the first Mafia game. In this game, set in the early 1900s, we should go back to Sicily and explore the origins of Salieri's Mafia as we know it from the first game. We don't really know anything else about the story yet, but even this sounds really cool to me, and I can't wait for more information about this game. So if you haven't played any Mafia games yet, you should definitely give it a try, at least the first 2. Despite not being super popular worldwide, it's an absolutely essential part of European gaming culture, even more for me. In the Czech Republic, both Mafia and KCD are literally national treasures, and I can't be more proud that I was created in the same country as these incredible games. Anyway, that's it for today's video. I hope if you haven't played these games before, I managed to convince you to try at least one of them. And of course, you can recommend your favorite single-player story games you'd like being more popular. I'm sorry for not being active recently, but I'll make it up for it very soon, don't worry. Until then, you guys have a good one, I'll see you next time. All enemies have this sort of... The fuck do you mean trying to connect, motherfucker?